Ion had been waiting for this day since the first time he saw Zara in school. They grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same school, and for as long as anyone could remember, they were inseparable. Everyone said that if true love existed, it was theirs. Ion was always the quiet, thoughtful one, and Zara was the one who could light up any room with her laughter. Together, they were a perfect balance. His calm to her energy, her smile to his silence. The morning of their wedding was full of joy and excitement. The sun was bright, the sky clear, and the small town buzzed with celebration. Ion woke up early, unable to sleep from excitement. He looked at himself in the mirror, straightened his sherwani, and whispered, "Today's the day." His friends teased him, saying he looked more nervous than a student on exam day, but Ion just smiled. He couldn't wait to see Zara in her wedding dress. On the other side of town, Zara sat surrounded by her cousins and friends. They were helping her with her makeup, laughing and chatting nonstop. She kept glancing at her reflection, adjusting her dupatta again and again. Her heart raced with both excitement and disbelief. After all these years, she was finally becoming Ion's wife. Her mother stood by the door, wiping away tears, half proud and half emotional. "You look like a princess," she whispered, and Zara smiled back, her eyes shining. The wedding ceremony was set in a large garden filled with colorful flowers and strings of lights. Guests arrived wearing their best clothes, children ran around with sparklers, and the air smelled of roses and cardamom tea. When Ion arrived with his friends, music filled the air. Zara's friends peeked from behind the curtains to catch a glimpse of him. When Zara finally walked down the aisle, Ion's heart skipped a beat. She looked breathtaking. He could barely breathe as their eyes met. Everyone clapped, and someone shouted, "Finally." As the ceremony began, the two of them could barely focus on the priest's words. They kept stealing glances at each other, smiling shyly, like it was their first date all over again. When they exchanged vows, Ion's voice trembled slightly, but his words were full of sincerity. "You're my best friend and my home," he said softly. Zara's eyes filled with tears as she replied, "And you're my forever." The guests cheered, clapping and whistling as the two were officially declared husband and wife. After the ceremony, everyone gathered to congratulate them. There was laughter everywhere, music and dancing. Ion's friends lifted him up in the air, shouting jokes, while Zara's cousins surrounded her, teasing her about the honeymoon. Even the oldest members of the family smiled, saying they hadn't seen such a joyful wedding in years. For a moment, everything seemed perfect to perfect, as if time had paused just for them. When it was finally time for them to leave for the reception hall, their families gathered outside the venue to bid them farewell. Zara hugged her parents tightly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her father, trying to hold back his own tears, whispered, "Take care of each other." Ion promised he would. Their car was decorated beautifully with flowers and ribbons, "Just married" written on the back. Everyone threw rose petals as they got inside. The sound of laughter and cheers followed them as the car started to move. Ion looked at Zara and said with a playful grin, "So, Mrs. Ion, how does it feel?" Zara laughed, wiping her tears. "Feels unreal. Like I'm dreaming." He reached out and took her hand, holding it tightly. "Nothing can go wrong today," he said softly. She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. They both looked out of the window at the fading sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air outside smelled fresh after a distant rain. Inside the car, everything felt peaceful. The noise of the wedding faded behind them, replaced by the quiet hum of the road. They talked about how funny their friends were, how delicious the food had been, and how they couldn't wait to start their new life together. Zara giggled as she looked at the henna on her hands, tracing the letters of Ion's name hidden in the design. She showed it to him proudly, and he laughed, pretending to act surprised. "So that's where my name went," he joked. The car passed through familiar streets, each holding memories of their time together where they had first met. The small cafe where they used to sit for hours, and the corner where Ion had once nervously confessed his love to her. Everything around them seemed to whisper their story back to them. Zara took out her phone and started recording a short video. "Say hi, husband," she said, turning the camera toward Ion. He smiled awkwardly, waving. "Our forever starts now," she said cheerfully. blowing a kiss toward the camera. Ion laughed and said, "You're going to make everyone jealous with that video." As they drove further, Zara's phone buzzed. It was a message from her brother. "Drive safe. It's raining near the bridge." She showed it to Ion, and he nodded. "Don't worry, we're almost there," he said. Outside, the light drizzle had just begun, small drops tapping gently against the car window. The roads glistened under the streetlights, and the wipers moved slowly back and forth. Zara watched the raindrops race each other down the glass, feeling warm and safe beside him. Ion turned on the radio. Their favorite song started playing, a song they had danced to at their college farewell years ago. He reached over, took her hand again, and together they sang along softly. It was one of those moments that felt endless, like time itself had decided to stop and watch them. The sound of their laughter mixed with the rhythm of the rain, creating a memory that would live forever in everyone's hearts. As they crossed the bridge, Ion glanced at Zara, who had her eyes closed, smiling to herself. He thought about how lucky he was, how this one person had changed his life completely. He whispered her name, and she opened her eyes. "What?" she asked softly. He smiled and said nothing. "Just making sure you're real." She laughed, squeezing his hand, and said, "I'm real, and I'm yours." The car continued to roll forward, their laughter filling the night. Neither of them knew that in just 30 minutes everything would change. The families waiting at the reception hall were still decorating the stage, arranging flowers, and preparing to welcome them with applause. Their friends were setting up the camera to record their grand entry as husband and wife. No one could have imagined that somewhere on that road, beneath the same rain that had felt so peaceful moments ago, fate was preparing something cruel. For now, though, in that quiet car with the sound of music and raindrops, Ion and Zara were only two people in love, completely unaware that this perfect evening would soon become the saddest story their town would ever tell. The car moved smoothly through the narrow road as the last bit of sunlight faded behind the hills. Inside, Ion and Zara were still smiling, like two children who had just won the biggest prize of their lives. The soft hum of the engine, the rhythmic tapping of rain on the roof, and the faint sound of music from the radio filled the air. For them, it wasn't just a drive, it was the first journey of their married life, and every second felt magical. Ion glanced at Zara, who was fixing her hair in the mirror, still glowing from the wedding lights. Her red bangles made a soft tinkling sound every time she moved her hand. He couldn't stop staring. "You know," he said with a teasing grin, "I still can't believe you said yes to me." Zara laughed, turning to him with playful eyes. "You begged for years. Remember?" she said, pretending to be serious. He chuckled and replied, "Begged. I call it convincing." She laughed louder this time, and the car was filled with joy again. Zara reached out for her phone and switched to the front camera. "Okay, our first video as husband and wife," she announced proudly. Ion groaned in mock protest, but he couldn't refuse her. "Fine," he said, trying not to smile. She hit record and said in her cheerful tone, "Hi, everyone. This is Zara and Ion, officially married now. Our forever starts now." Ion leaned in closer and waved, adding, "Send help. She's already bossing me around." Zara gasped and laughed so hard that the phone shook in her hands. "You'll regret that," she warned, still laughing. They replayed the video and laughed again at how silly they looked. "We'll show this to our kids one day," Zara said softly, looking at the screen. Ion smiled and replied, "Yeah, and they'll say, we were crazy." She grinned. "Let them. I want a crazy life with you." The warmth between them grew with every word. There was something so pure in their happiness, like they had forgotten the world. Outside that car even existed. Rain began to fall harder now. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, cutting through the blur of water. Streetlights reflected on the wet road like tiny stars on the ground. Ion slowed the car a little, keeping one hand on the wheel and the other still holding Zara's hand. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, watching the rain slide down the window. "Yeah," he said quietly. Though he wasn't looking at the rain, he was looking at her. They passed a small roadside tea stall where a few people stood under umbrellas. Zara pointed and said, "Remember how we used to stop there after college?" Ion smiled. "Of course. You always ordered chai and complained it was too hot. You always pretended to burn your tongue," she said, laughing. It was like every turn of the road carried a piece of their story. Small memories stitched together over years of love. Zara leaned back in her seat, resting her head against the window. The cold glass felt nice against her warm skin. "Do you think we'll still be like this when we're old?" she asked softly. "Like what?" Ion asked. "Laughing at silly things, making videos, driving through rain." He smiled, keeping his eyes on the road. "If we're together, then yes. Even if you make me drink cold tea at 70, she nudged him playfully. "You'll love it, old man," he laughed, the sound mixing with the rain and music perfectly. After a while, she started humming along to the song playing on the radio. It was their song. The one they had danced to at their farewell in college the night Ion had promised he'd marry her one day. Zara's voice was soft, almost lost in the sound of the rain, but Ion heard every word. He joined in, slightly off tune, making her laugh again. The world outside might have been gray and wet, but inside that car, everything was warm and full of life. A few minutes later, Zara's phone buzzed again. It was a message from her brother. "Drive carefully, it's raining heavily near the bridge," the message read. She showed it to Ion. He nodded. "Don't worry. I'll be careful. We're almost there anyway." She smiled, but her eyes lingered on the road ahead. The rain had started to fall even harder now, and the sound of thunder rumbled far away. The windshield wipers squeaked faster, struggling to keep up. Still, Ion drove calmly, focused, and confident. To lighten the mood, Zara started joking again. "You better not get me to the reception late, mister," she said, pretending to be stern. "Everyone's waiting for their favorite bride." Ion smirked. "Favorite? You mean only bride?" "Exactly," she said proudly. "So drive faster." "I thought you just told me to be careful," he teased. She laughed and threw a flower petal from her bouquet at him. It landed on his shoulder, and he left it there. "I'll keep it," he said with a smile. "A lucky charm." Zara rolled her eyes playfully but secretly liked the idea. The smell of wet earth filled the air as the rain grew heavier. Lightning flashed in the sky, lighting up the wet road ahead for a split second before darkness returned. They could see the reflection of trees swaying in puddles by the roadside. The wind blew stronger, making the ribbons on their decorated car flutter wildly. Zara watched them dance in the air and whispered, "It's like the sky is celebrating with us." Ion nodded. "Even the rain came to bless us," he said jokingly. They both smiled again, unaware of the cruel irony those words carried. They had no idea that in just a few minutes, this same rain would become the reason for everyone's tears. The drive continued peacefully for a few more minutes. Zara leaned closer, resting her head on Ion's shoulder. "I can't wait to start our new life," she said softly. "I want to cook for you, travel, maybe even move to the city," he chuckled. "You cooking? Last time you almost burned instant noodles. That was years ago," she protested, pretending to be offended. He smiled and kissed her forehead gently. "Then I'll cook. You just smile like this forever." Ira closed her eyes, her smile still there. The radio changed songs to something slow and romantic. Ion tapped his fingers lightly on the steering wheel, keeping rhythm with the music. He looked at her for a second longer than he should have, memorizing the moment, the way her dupatta shimmered in the light, how peaceful she looked. For a man who had everything he ever wanted sitting right beside him, there was nothing else he could ask for. Outside, the world had turned silver with rain. The road glistened like glass, and mist began to rise from the ground. The faint outlines of trees and distant headlights created a dreamlike view. Zara opened her eyes and whispered, "It's beautiful." Ion agreed, but his focus was slowly shifting to the fog ahead. He noticed how the visibility was dropping. Still, he didn't want to worry her. "Almost there," he said softly. She smiled again, whispering, "Our forever really did start today." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze and smiled back. That was their last moment of peace, two hearts completely in love, holding on to a future that neither of them would ever see. For now, it was just rain, laughter, and the illusion that happiness would last forever. The rain was falling harder now, thick sheets of water pouring from the sky and hitting the road like a curtain. The sound of thunder rolled in the distance, deep and heavy. Ion squinted through the windshield, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. The wipers moved quickly, but it was still hard to see anything clearly. The road, which had looked peaceful a few minutes ago, now seemed endless and dangerous. The trees on both sides blurred into shadows as lightning flashed across the dark sky. Zara sat quietly, still holding Ion's hand. She could feel the tension in his grip. "Maybe we should stop for a bit," she said softly. "Let the rain slow down." Ion thought for a moment but shook his head. "We're close to the reception hall. Everyone's waiting. If I drive slowly, we'll be fine." Zara nodded, trusting him completely. She tried to smile, though her eyes kept drifting to the blurry road ahead. The air inside the car had grown colder, and she rubbed her hands together to stay warm. The tires splashed through puddles as they moved along the wet road. Every now and then, a flash of lightning revealed the steep edges of the highway, reminding Ion to stay in the center. The rain made a soft but continuous roar against the roof, almost drowning out the sound of the music that still played faintly on the radio. The song that had felt romantic minutes ago now sounded distant and sad. Suddenly, a loud horn blared somewhere ahead. Ion's eyes darted toward the sound. Through the rain, he could barely make out the bright headlights of another vehicle, large car coming fast from the opposite direction. It was swerving, the driver clearly struggling to control it. "What is that guy doing?" Ion muttered under his breath, his voice tense. Zara leaned forward, trying to see through the foggy windshield. "Maybe he can't see the road," she said nervously. The other car flashed its lights wildly, moving from one lane to another. For a second, it disappeared behind a curtain of rain, then suddenly reappeared, now much closer and still speeding. Ion's heart began to race. "He's out of control," he said quickly, pressing the brake pedal gently. The tires made a wet, screeching sound as the car began to slow down. Zara's fingers clutched the edge of her seat. "Ion," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Ion tried to steer toward the left side of the road to give space, but the other driver lost control completely. The speeding car hit a patch of oil mixed with rainwater, spun sideways, and started sliding directly toward them. The world seemed to move in slow motion. Zara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ion shouted, "Hold on," and turned the wheel hard to the right. The car swerved sharply, tires screaming against the wet road. The two cars collided with a deafening crash. The sound of metal crushing and glass shattering echoed into the storm. The force threw Ion and Zara forward. The front of their car crumpled like paper, the hood twisting upward. The airbags exploded open with a loud pop, filling the small space with smoke and dust. Zara's head hit the side window, and everything went white. Ion's chest slammed into the steering wheel before he was thrown back into his seat. The car spun twice before hitting the barrier on the side of the road. Rain continued to pour mercilessly, washing over the wreckage. The headlights flickered weakly before one of them went out completely. The radio had stopped, leaving only the sound of rain and the faint hissing of the damaged engine. For a few seconds, everything was silent except for the storm. A small truck passing by slowed down. The driver, a middle-aged man, noticed the twisted wreck on the side of the road and stopped immediately. He jumped out, pulling his jacket over his head and running toward the scene. "Hey, is anyone there?" he shouted, his voice nearly lost in the rain. When he reached the car, his heart sank. The front of the vehicle was crushed beyond recognition. Flowers from the wedding decorations scattered across the wet asphalt. The "Just Married" sign hung half-torn from the back bumper. He tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. He peered through the broken window and saw the couple inside. Ion slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from his forehead, and Zara's head resting against the shattered glass. "Oh no, please no," the man whispered. He rushed back to his truck, grabbed his phone, and called for help. His hands were shaking. "There's been an accident, 2 people inside a white car, near the old bridge. Please send help." Minutes felt like hours as he waited in the rain. He ran back and forth between his truck and the wreck, trying to comfort them even though they didn't move. "Stay with me, please," he kept saying, his voice breaking. He could see Zara's wedding dress stained with mud and blood, the red bangles on her wrists broken into pieces. Ion's hand still rested on the steering wheel, his fingers slightly curled as if he had tried to protect her at the last second. Soon, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Emergency vehicles arrived in, ambulance and 2 police cars. The rescuers rushed out with flashlights and medical bags. "Step back, sir," one of them said gently to the truck driver who stood there soaked and trembling. The rescuers worked quickly, using metal cutters to pry open the doors. The sound of tearing metal filled the night as sparks flew in the rain. One of the paramedics reached inside and checked for pulses. His expression changed immediately. He looked at his team and shook his head slightly. "No heartbeat," he said quietly. Another paramedic tried to check the woman, whispering something under his breath, but then he, too, stopped. The rain seemed to fall heavier, as if the sky itself was mourning. They gently lifted Ion and Zara out of the car, laying them side by side on stretchers, covering them with white sheets. Their hands, once clasped in love, now rested just inches apart. The rescuers stood silently for a moment, even the police officers lowering their heads in respect. The only sound was the rain hitting the metal of the broken car and the faint hiss of the ambulance lights. The truck driver, still standing nearby, covered his mouth with his hand. Tears mixed with the rain on his face. "They were just married," he whispered to one of the officers, pointing at the flowers on the ground. The officer looked down, noticing a small phone lying near the wreck. He picked it up carefully, still recording. The last thing visible on the screen was Zara's smiling face saying, "Our forever starts now." The officer turned off the phone and placed it gently beside her. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the wet road, painting the scene in colors of sorrow. The ambulance doors closed softly, and the vehicles began to drive away slowly, disappearing into the rain. The truck driver remained there a little longer, staring at the empty road. The sound of thunder rolled again, echoing through the night. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Why them?" But there was no answer, only rain and silence. Morning arrived with a strange stillness over the small town. The celebration lights that had glowed all night outside Ion's house were still hanging, but their brightness felt wrong now. The garlands that had once smelled of joy now carried only silence. No one could understand what had happened. Just a few hours earlier, the sound of laughter and drums had filled the air. Now, the same people who had danced with excitement were gathered in front of the house, standing in disbelief. News of the accident spread quickly. Someone from the rescue team had called Ion's father in the middle of the night. When he answered the phone, his voice was still cheerful. He thought maybe the couple had reached the reception safely, but when the caller spoke, his smile disappeared instantly. "There has been an accident near the old bridge," the man said quietly. "We're sorry. They didn't make it." For a few seconds, Ion's father couldn't move or speak. The phone slipped from his hand, and he just stood there frozen. His wife saw the look on his face and rushed to him, asking what happened. He couldn't answer. He just whispered, "Ion and Zara," before breaking down completely. His wife screamed, falling to her knees, her voice echoing through the house. Their relatives came running, and soon the entire neighborhood knew. At Zara's home, it was the same story. Her family had stayed awake, waiting for the couple to arrive at the reception. Her mother had even been fixing Zara's favorite dessert, saying she'd be hungry after the drive. When they heard a knock at the door, everyone ran, thinking it was them. Instead, it was a police officer, standing with a sorrowful expression. Behind him were 2 men from the ambulance service. They didn't need to say anything, their faces said it all. Zara's father collapsed onto the sofa, his hands trembling. Her mother screamed her daughter's name again and again, until she fainted. By morning, both families were united by the same heartbreak. The police brought the bodies home for the final rituals. The wedding car, now broken and covered in mud, was towed back to town later that day. Its crushed frame and scattered flowers became a haunting sight. The "Just Married" sign still hung loosely from the back bumper, fluttering in the wind. People passing by stopped to look, whispering prayers. It didn't seem real. How could the people so full of life just disappear like that? Friends and relatives filled the houses, but no one spoke much. The silence was too heavy. The music that had played just hours earlier still echoed in everyone's minds, now replaced by the sound of sobbing. Zara's wedding dress, once bright red and full of joy, now lay folded on her bed, untouched. Her phone was placed beside it. When someone picked it up, they found the last video she had recorded in the car, the one where she said, "Our forever starts now." Someone played it softly for the families to see. At first, everyone smiled through their tears. Zara's voice sounded so happy, her laughter so alive. But as the video ended, the room fell completely silent. The last frame, her smiling face beside Ion, froze on the screen. Ion's mother reached out to touch it, her hand trembling. "They were so happy," she whispered, her voice cracking. Outside, hundreds of people gathered for the funeral. It was the same crowd that had danced and cheered at the wedding. Now they stood with heads bowed, eyes filled with tears. The smell of incense filled the air, replacing the scent of flowers that had once decorated the wedding stage. 2 white caskets lay side by side, covered in petals. Ion's father sat near them, holding a framed photo of his son, while Zara's mother leaned against her husband, unable to stop crying. Even strangers who had never met the couple came to pay their respects. Reporters arrived too, their cameras flashing. The story of the couple who died 30 minutes after their wedding spread quickly across the country. Newspapers printed their pictures, the smiling newlyweds hand in hand, moments before the tragedy. People everywhere shared their story online, calling it one of the saddest love stories they had ever heard. When the priest began the final prayers, everyone fell silent. The wind blew softly, carrying the sound of crying from both families. Ion's friends, who had been joking and teasing him the previous night, now stood in a line, eyes red and puffy. One of them whispered, "He was supposed to call us when they reached." Another said quietly, "He said nothing could go wrong today." Their words broke into tears. As the ceremony continued, Zara's younger brother placed her favorite flower-white jasmine on her casket. "You promised to come home," he said in a small voice. Her mother broke down again, clutching his arm. The sight was unbearable. Ion's sister held Zara's hand one last time before it was taken away. "You were already like my sister," she whispered, crying. "You'll always be." When both caskets were carried to the burial ground, the entire town followed. People walked behind them in silence, umbrellas in hand as rain began to fall again, light and cold. It was as if the heavens themselves were crying. Drops of rain mixed with the tears on everyone's faces. Someone whispered, "It's the same rain that fell on their wedding night." The thought made many weep harder. After the funeral, both families sat together in grief. The house that had been full of laughter now felt empty and quiet. The hafit and wedding cake still sat in the kitchen. The gifts remained unopened. Every corner of the house reminded them of what had been lost. On the dining table lay Zara's bouquet, its flowers beginning to wilt. Beside it, Ion's cufflinks gleamed faintly in the dim light. For days, people kept visiting to offer condolences. Some brought food, others just sat in silence. No one knew what to say. Every time someone tried to speak, their voice broke. "They loved each other so much," one neighbor said softly. "God must have wanted them together even in heaven." At night, both families couldn't sleep. The mothers cried until their eyes were swollen, calling their children's names in the dark. The fathers sat quietly, staring at photos on their phones, replaying the last messages. Ion's father kept listening to his son's voice note from the morning. "Abu, we'll see you soon at the reception. Don't worry, everything's perfect." Each time he heard it, his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. Days later, the news reports revealed more details about the crash. The other driver had survived, but was severely injured. Witnesses said he had lost control after hitting oil spilled on the wet road. But what shocked everyone was what came next. The police discovered that Ion's car had faulty brakes. The rental company that had provided the vehicle had ignored maintenance warnings. The accident could have been prevented. This truth would later lead to anger, court cases, and demands for justice. But for now, the families were too broken to think about anything beyond their loss. That night, when everyone had left, Zara's father sat alone in her room. He looked at her wedding dress again, then at her photo on the wall. He whispered, "You look so happy, my child. You deserved a long life." Tears rolled down his face as thunder rumbled again in the distance. Across town, Ion's mother was doing the same, holding her son's shirt close to her heart, whispering his name into the quiet night. The town that had celebrated their love now mourned their fate. For weeks, people left flowers at the bridge where the accident happened. Couples passing by would stop, say a prayer, and promise to drive carefully. The memory of that night remained heavy in everyone's heart, a cruel reminder of how fast joy can turn into sorrow. And through it all, one sentence echoed in the minds of everyone who had seen that video. Zara's last words, "Our forever starts now." Days passed, but for Ion and Zara's families, time had stopped. The house that had been glowing with wedding lights now felt empty, filled only with the faint smell of roses and perfume from that unforgettable day. Their wedding clothes still hung in the corner, untouched. Zara's mother couldn't bring herself to remove the garlands or the photos. Every corner of the home whispered their names. A week later, the official report from the police came. It confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The crash wasn't only caused by the rain. The car they were driving had serious brake problems. The rental company had known about it, but didn't fix it. They had chosen to ignore the fault, risking lives just to save money. When Ion's father read the report, his hands trembled. His eyes filled with anger and disbelief. "They killed them," he whispered. "They killed our children with their greed." Zara's brother slammed his fist on the table, shouting that they couldn't let it go. It wasn't just an accident anymore. It was negligence. The families decided to fight. They went to court, determined to bring justice for Ion and Zara. It wasn't easy. The rental company tried to deny responsibility, saying the couple had been driving too fast. But evidence told the truth. The car's brakes had failed completely. Witnesses testified about seeing the vehicle sliding uncontrollably before hitting the barrier. The judge listened carefully, and slowly, the truth began to surface. During this painful process, the families discovered something beautiful too. How many people had been touched by Ion and Zara's love story? Neighbors, friends, even strangers came forward to help. Donations arrived for legal fees. Mechanics and road safety experts volunteered their time to prove what had gone wrong. It became bigger than one tragedy. It became a fight for every person who had lost someone because of carelessness. Months went by. The court finally ruled that the rental company was guilty of criminal negligence. The owners were fined heavily and sentenced to prison. But no amount of punishment could bring the couple back. When the verdict was announced, Zara's mother cried silently. "We did it, my child," she said to the framed photo of her daughter. "You got justice." Still, the pain didn't go away. Nights were long and filled with memories. But one evening, as Ion's father scrolled through old messages on his phone, he found a video Zara had sent to him the morning of the wedding. In it, she smiled brightly, saying, "Uncle, don't cry today. It's a happy day. We're finally starting our forever." That short clip broke everyone again, and yet it also gave them strength. It reminded them how full of hope she had been, how much love she and Ion had shared. They decided that their story shouldn't end with tears, should become a lesson that could save others. So together, both families started a small foundation in their names, the Ion and Zara Foundation. Its goal was simple, too: spread awareness about road safety, car inspections, and responsible driving. They used whatever money they had left to organize small events at schools and local centers. They invited mechanics to teach people how to check their cars before driving. At first, only a few people came, but slowly, more began to join. Channels that had once reported the tragedy now returned to tell a new story, one of courage and hope. The foundation grew, and soon it became a national movement. Posters of Ion and Zara were displayed on highways with the words, "Love is precious, drive safe." Each year on their wedding anniversary, both families gathered at the same hall where the ceremony had taken place. But instead of music and dance, they played the short videos Zara had recorded in the car that day. Her voice echoed softly in the room. "Our forever starts now." Every time people heard those words, many couldn't hold back their tears. But those tears were no longer only of sorrow. They were also of inspiration. Ion and Zara had become symbols of eternal love and a reminder of how fragile life can be. Over time, the foundation saved many lives. People started taking car inspections seriously. Some even wrote letters to the families, saying, "Because of your children's story, we checked our brakes and it saved us." Those messages brought comfort to hearts that had been shattered beyond repair. Years passed. The wedding photos of Ion and Zara faded slightly with time, but their story didn't. It lived in the hearts of thousands. Their love had lasted longer than life itself, not in the form of a marriage, but as a message that protected others from tragedy. Zara's brother once stood on a stage during a foundation event and said, "They didn't get to live there forever, but through this, they gave others a chance to live theirs." The audience fell silent, every person feeling the weight of his words. Even now, whenever rain falls and the roads glisten under the streetlights, their parents still look out the window, remembering that evening. They imagine Ion and Zara somewhere beyond the clouds, still holding hands, still smiling. The world may have lost two souls, but their love became something larger, a legacy that turned pain into purpose. Their story taught everyone who heard it that life can change in a single moment. It showed that love doesn't end with death. It continues in the good that follows. And though they only had 30 minutes after their wedding, those minutes became eternal, because love that pure never truly fades.